Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Dear student, I Dr. Shivang Patel, Associate Professor from School of Computer Science, welcome you all in the Chaitanya studio of Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University for the lecture series of Python programming. In the last few sessions, we have discussed procedural programming in Python. Now from today onwards, we are going to start object-oriented concepts in Python programming. So in this unit, basically objectives are there. After studying this unit, you can understand the basic concept of object-oriented programming. Then you can differentiate between classes and object, use attributes and methods in the classes and object in the program, apply self keyword to manage object-specific behavior, and recognition benefits using object-oriented programming in software development. So basically, till now whatever coding or whatever programming we have done in this Python programming, these are based on procedural approach. Now what is procedural approach? That you already aware. Say for example, you want to perform any task, you are creating a program in which multiple functions are there. Your programs or whatever the task that you are dividing into multiple functions, and different variables and functions, they are scattered in the program. But this methodology, or you can say that this technique, that is convenient if the program size is smaller, right? So we are splitting our program into different function and execute our code, but the program size will increase, complexity will also increase, and in that case this procedural approach, that is not quite efficient and for generating the output. So to remove multiple limitations of procedural programming, we are starting with the object-oriented concept. As you already aware, different programming languages like C++ and Java, we have already done that object-oriented concept like object, classes, polymorphism, inheritance. These are the different features that you already aware in the object-oriented programming. Now all those features that we can implement in Python program also. So think day-to-day problem. Say for example, you want to implement whatever the real life things into your program, or you can say that suppose you want to incorporate whatever the real life things into your program. In that case, it is quite difficult in the procedural oriented programming. So what happened? Whatever the physical things available in our day-to-day life, that you can represent all those physical things in the form of object, then you can create object-oriented programming. So say, let us say one example. Say for example, you are having a car, having the different color, different model, different speed, right? Different features, or you can say that different properties are there. But it is not just only these properties. Car having some different operations also. So think about any object or think about anything that are having multiple features and multiple processes. So the processes are increased, and if you want to tackle that all processes in procedure oriented, then it is quite difficult. To remove all the difficulties, we are introducing object oriented concept in this Python programming. So it is the method of organizing code into objects through which we can represent real world entities. So object is what? As you already aware in different programming languages, is nothing but the real life entity or whatever the physical entity that you can represent in the form of object. Say for example, it may be living thing, it may be non-living thing. You can represent any person as an object. You can represent book, you can represent laptop, you can represent car, vehicle, anything in the form of object. So in short, you can understand that any physical thing that can be available in our real life, that you can represent in your program with the help of object. So whatever the programming that may become easier, or whatever the day-to-day real life task that may be incorporate in the form of programming with the help of the concept called classes and object, right? So object is real world thing that you can interact with, and object similar kind of behavior that can be available. Say for example person, so different persons are there, but they are the behavior that may remain same. Say for example bird, so different types of birds are available, but their behavior that may same. Say for example vehicle, different kinds, different categories of vehicle are there, but the behavior are same. So you can group whatever the entities having the same behavior into some specific cluster. That is nothing but the class, right? So you can say that the class is nothing but the blueprint, and whatever the instance or object that you are creating of that particular class with the help of object-oriented fundamentals, right? So by object-oriented approach, you can write the code that is clearer, more organized and easier to reuse, especially when the programs that grows. So if the program size is smaller, then it is okay with procedural programming. But whenever the program size increases, the complexity will also increase. So Python will support both the kind of paradigm, object-oriented paradigm as well as the procedural paradigm. We can say that, say for example, suppose your program size is smaller, or whatever the task you want to perform that is limited. Suppose you want to perform addition of two numbers. In that case, it is not required to create the whole class. It is not required to create the object for that, right? Because if you are creating classes and object for the smaller task, so execution time will increase. In that case, functional programming or procedural programming, that is better compared to object oriented, right? So if you are requiring to take benefit of both the programming paradigms, that is procedural oriented as well as object oriented, then Python will support both these paradigms, in which suppose you are not requiring to create object and classes, you are not requiring the features of object oriented. In that case, you can follow that procedural approach, you can follow that function approach that is supported in the Python. And if the program size is more, suppose your code size will be increased and you are requiring to implement object-oriented concepts in your program, then Python will also support that object-oriented programming, right? So now this is the precise object-oriented that performs, allows us to focus on what object does and worries less about the internal complexity. So that is one of the advantages of object-oriented. Here what happened, say for example, you are having a mobile, you are operating the mobile very well. So you don't require or you don't worry about how the internal structure is or how the inbuilt mechanism they are working, right? So without bothering about whatever the internal structure or the working pattern of that internal structure, you just have to use that particular thing. Same way here, the object-oriented programming that will provide you how the object will work, but hiding the detail, the background complexity, right? So that's why it is very advantageous. Now, how are the some reasons? Here are the some reasons that for object-oriented programming that are useful. The first one is better organization. So if you are talking about the procedural approach, in which we are creating number of variables, in which we are creating number of functions for different tasks, right? So the function and the variables, they are scattered in the whole program. If the program size is smaller, there is no issue. But suppose the program size is increased and in your whole program or in your whole application, multiple functions and multiple variables, they are scattered. And if you want to manage this, it is quite difficult to manage. Instead of that procedural paradigm, suppose you are following that object-oriented concept. So what happened? The related data or related function, you can say that the method, they are grouped together in particular class. So if you are requiring some specific scenario, in that case you have to focus on that particular class only. So that can be easily manageable. It can be better organizable if you are following that object-oriented approach. Then the most fundamental and important concept, that is reusability. Now suppose you are creating some code. Say for example, you are creating a class for that car. Now suppose you are requiring to add some another car in your program or in your application. So it is not required to create the whole class again. You just have to create that object. So that object can use whatever the properties of that particular class or whatever the methods in that particular class, they can access it, right? So reusability feature is there. You can reuse your code. It is not required to create scratch, whatever the code from the scratch. right? So you can use whatever the available code with you. Then after scalability, you already aware the feature of object oriented that is called inheritance. Suppose you want to increase the scope, if you want to increase the scalability or adaptability of your code, you are just requiring to add the features by inheriting that particular class. Suppose you want to add some of the features in that particular class, you just simply require to inherit that particular class. It is not required to recreate that class, and you can add whatever the additional features into that class. So this way you can change the scale of your code or of your application. Then clearer code or for the and the maintenance. So obviously suppose the error will occur, and if you are not following the object oriented concept, what happen? If the code size will increase, you have to search where the error will, or you have to debug your code, and you are confusing in multiple functions, right? But suppose you are following that object oriented concept, then classes and the objects, they are separated. Particular class that represent particular task, and if the error will occur, you just have to focus only that class. The other classes in the program, that is not required to change, it is not required to modify during the error handling, right? So that's why the maintenance, that is easier. Now closer to real life, as we have already discussed, because suppose you want to simplify your code, you want to represent whatever the real life entities, real life things into your programming, you want to manage that particular real life thing, objects, into your program, then it is only possible with the help of object and classes, because whatever the processes that can be managed or you are day to day deal with in real life, that cannot be possible to implement in procedural approach. It is easily implementable in the object oriented. So it is good for the programmer as well as the normal user, that whatever the daily life thing that can be manageable with the help of programming. So you can render whatever the real life thing into program. Then after understanding classes and object, so as we have already discussed, class is the blueprint for creating the object, while the object is the instance of that class. Now it defines the structures as well as the behavior. So that class contains multiple attributes, or you can say that the multiple features or the characteristics and the behavior. So whatever the objects that you are creating, the value that can be defined from those variables, as well as whatever the processes that can be managed by with the help of those methods or whatever the functions that you are defining in the class. Now remember one thing, we are simply using the function and the method interchangeability, but what happened, there is a minor difference. If you are talking about the function, then whatever the data you are dealing with, that are scattered in the whole program, right? But if you are talking about the method, so it only within the specific class, and only the objects of that particular class that can access those methods. So if you are defining function within the class, then you can say that that function is the method. Otherwise, you can say that it is the function, or you can say that it is the procedure, right? That is the minor difference. Now you must have to follow the syntax for creating a class as well as the object. So here on the screen, you can say one example. We have created one class with the keyword class, and then after the space, then after you are giving the class name. Normally, the class name first letter is capital. It is not the it is just the coding convention. It is not the thumb rule, right? Normally the class first letter, that is capital. That's why we are following here. If you are putting here in the small letter, there will be no issue, but it is the coding convention. Then after, colon sign is there, so it will define that the class is created. Here the pass keyword that we are using, suppose the class doesn't contain anything, no attributes, no method, in that case you can simply skip with the help of pass. Then after, we are creating the object, so car1 equal to car, that is the class name car, and then after the parenthesis. So here it is the blank parenthesis. We will see in detail in the next subsequent sessions that the constructor will be created, how constructor and the different methods that will be created, so you can get more idea. Then after, we are printing that object. Now remember the output here on the screen, you can observe this output. Car1 and car2, both two objects that we have created. So whenever the object will be created, the memory location from the heap that will be assigned to that particular object. So if you want to print that particular object, you will get the address. You can say that the memory location in the heap that will be printed here. So it is in the hexadecimal. So you can observe here both the class object at the location that will be represented here for class 1 and the class 2. So we are concluding our session here. In today's session, we have discussed basically what is object-oriented paradigm, how the object-oriented programming that is helpful. We have already seen the difference between procedural as well as object-oriented programming. We have seen one basic syntax, how to create class. In the next subsequent session, we will do one practical, multiple programs in which you will see how to create class, how to create objects, how they are dealing with the memory and some other features of object-oriented programming. Till then, happy learning. Thank you.
स्वाध्यायः परमम्